Please consider this real life endgame between Mark Taimanov with the white pieces versus British master Leonard and author Leonard Barden. This took place in London 1954. We have black to move. Again, as I always say, if you want, pause the video, set up the pieces on a real chessboard, and think about the position for 5 minutes. And come up with your own conclusions. Um, for as far as what black should do. Can he draw? Can he win? Etc. for both sides, because that's the real way you're gonna improve, by incorporating the understanding, right? By just thinking about it, using your own mind, no engines, right? And just having fun with it. All right. So with that said, now I'm gonna go on with the analysis. Let's look at it first. I always like to count up the material first. All right. So you can count. Hopefully, I count white has 6 pawns, black has 5 pawns. So that's a plus on the material side for white. Now we know chess is a funny game. Material always doesn't equate to victory or material advantage, but it's good to know, right? It's one of the factors. Okay, so we see it's black to move. White has an extra pawn on the queen side. So when we're making a plan, right? And I said this in my other videos, and it's just like in life. You want to have an ultimate goal first, because if you don't set up any type of goal, then you won't get to where you're going. All right, like if you don't have a place to go, you'll just end up somewhere, right? You will end up somewhere. So it's always good to have a goal so you can concentrate your energy, and your forces on, not to sound too philosophical, but you have to have like a destination, like, okay, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. You don't just want to be randomly like moving the pieces around. And I always say this quote from Frank Marshall. He said it's better to have a bad plan than not to have any plan at all. Okay? So, and another saying along the same lines is, if you don't know where you're going, you will end up there. Right? It's the same type of scenario. So here, you have to come up with a plan for white. It's not white's move, but just, when you're analyzing the position, what's the plan for white? What's the plan for black? Well, obviously, white's main objective should be to create a pass pawn on the queen side. That's their ultimate. On the king side, you have a 3-2 material advantage there, so you should be trying to create a pawn on the king side, right? So go from 3-2 to a 1-0 pawn advantage on the king side. Then, in the attempt to queen that pawn on the king side, you can use that pawn as a decoy or distraction for black. Black has to defend that pawn, and then you take your king over to the queen side and sweep up those pawns. That's the major. That should be your objective, right? And then the plan is, okay, well, how should I do it, right? The plan is, okay, now what, and then the tactics are the actual calculation part. Now flipping it over to the black side. Black is down material. So black wants to stop that from happening and perhaps try to draw here. So that's the first thing you got to understand, is that black must understand, hey, I'm trying to draw this, right? My winning chances are nil. I have to try to hold. And the best chance to try to hold is possibly create a position where, okay, perhaps white has an extra pawn, but understanding his key squares, that he can possibly hold white to a draw here. All right. So all of these pawns here, this basically boils down to an opposition problem, where it's kind of like white wants to force black to move when he doesn't want to, and black wants to force white to move when he doesn't want to. So let's look at it. All right. So Barden here, again, Barden is black, Taimanov is white. Barden played king e5 here. Good move. We always talk about centralizing the king in the end game. All right. And the idea behind this is basically to force white to consider the entry of the black king on the queen side. Black would love to play move like king d4 and just try to penetrate as a distraction. All right, before white can get this queen king side majority going. He plays king e5. Now Taimanov plays a4, so he just immediately freezes up the queen side. All right, so it's kind of creating a situation for like a future Zugzwang. All right, so consider the next moves. So after a4, king d4 was played. So again, black says, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and win this b pawn, and I'll be all right. Okay, he goes for his own counterplay. King d2. So there's the opposition I was talking about. Now notice, after king d2, black has no pawn move. So now you see the purpose of a4. Black has no point. Well, he can play b5, of course, but you know we don't even consider that as losing right away. So after king d2, we see, yeah, white has the opposition because black is forced to move his king. So he goes back to king e5, and now he plays king d3. Okay, now Taimanov starts engaging in a form of triangulation where he can make progress without giving up the opposition here. Now, this is very important. So king d3 happens, and now king f5 from Barden. So Barden now has the opposition because white doesn't have any legitimate pawn moves. But this is by design. Okay, white has calculated this already. So now king e2 is played, king e5. So he comes back. So he's basically trying to repeat the position, right? If Taimanov goes back to d3, trying to stop the king's entry into d4, king f5 will be played again, and you will have a repetition, right? And of course, being down material, he would love to get a draw like this. However, Taimanov has seen deeply. He plays the move king f2, king d4. Again, now Barden has the opposition, and white has to move here. But the difference is, remember, he has this 3-2 pawn majority on the king side, so he uses this time to play the move g4, which forces the transaction of pawns here and makes his majority even more dangerous on the king side. Notice now that black's king is a little further away from the defense of the king side pawn. So f takes g3 en passant. King takes g3. And now Barden is forced to go back. Plays king e5. He understands that he can't play king c3. He doesn't have enough time to capture those pawns and promote his own. So he goes back, king e5. And now, again, this is a critical point in the game. What would you play here as white? Again, if you set up the board if you want. Pause the video before I give you the answer. I'm giving you that heads up. This is very critical right here, because if white plays the wrong move, if white plays the wrong move, black has drawing chances here. Okay, so now I'm gonna give you what was played in the game. So here, king g2 was played by Taimanov. All right, very important. Like I said, this boils down to an opposition problem. The move to avoid here is f4, right? If white was thirsty and played f4 right away, then after king e4, white is in Zugzwang and must move away from the f pawn. Okay, and then black is okay, right? Very dangerous mistake here, right? The desire to just push that pawn, king e4, and then this is lost. This is why Taimanov dropped back with king g2, right? And king g2 is very important. Notice he didn't do king f2, but king g2, because now if say king f4 from white, excuse me, king f4 from black, then king f2, and then black must give up the move. In other words, white would have the opposition. So after king g2, okay, Barden's the master. He knows what time it is. He plays king f5 instead of king f4. But of course, I'm sorry, he didn't play king f5. He played king d4 here. All right. Again, there's a critical moment here, and the reason why is because if king f5, then of course not king f2, because king f2 would be meant by king f4, but king f1. And then if Barden tries to approach the pawn with f4, then king f2, gaining the opposition. So here he played the king g2, king d4 was played, and now f4. Notice the difference. f4 can be played now because on king e4, on king e4, I'll show it to you. See, now if he attacks, you see how that one move difference pays off, because now white can defend the pawn. See, now with king g3, say king f5, king g3, this forces black to move away from the pawn. So, and no matter where he moves, for instance, if he goes here, then white can come in with e4, king to e4. All right. And what will happen is that this pawn will be used as a decoy, and this king will eventually just shift over here, right? We'll probably win this pawn too, and then shift over. So Barden was forced to resign. But that's the difference between this position and this other position that we had looked at right here, f4. You know, if white played f4 prematurely, f4 king e4, where now it's white on the move and he has to move away and just drops the pawn. So now he played it at the right time. So now the approach, king e4, king g3, and now it's black who has to move away. If he tries to maintain opposition directly by that, then obviously just f5 and the pawn runs away. So king f5 and then king f3, and you see why I say it's an opposition problem, because again black is in Zugzwang. He must go back somehow, and when he goes back, for instance, say he goes here, right, we could keep it moving. If he goes here, then just simple move like king e4. And again, if it was just a king and pawn endgame, then black can hold this because of the key squares, and like I said, you could look that up on my other videos. But there's more. I'm sorry, if it was just king pawn versus king, it'd be different. But there's a bunch of pawns on the board. So again, and black just has to keep this surrendering space here, and then you just play a move like king g5, just pick up this guy, and that's a wrap. Okay, so again, there's another practical endgame, you know, that might come up. You know, not the exact ending, but of course, just the you know, I'm sure you've been in like similar positions where you're trying to hold and stuff like that. So I hope you enjoyed that. I want to show you, go back to this starting position, because as I showed you, Barden had played king e5 here. Another chance to try to secure counterplay, right, instead of king e5 would have been trying to sacrifice his pawn with a4. Because if you notice in the game, at the a4, this allowed Taimanov to create a position where black wind up, you know, being in some kind of Zugzwang. So a4 suggested, and after a4, the main line will run b takes, of course, and king f5. But it's just not enough counterplay for black to be able to hold the game. And this is a killer right here. Is again the same type of thing with the Zugzwang. King a6, king b3, king b6, and he tries to basically follow the white king. But watch what happens here. So after king e4, and analysis stops there, but I'll continue it. After king e4, king e5, excuse me, king e6, then you just drop the pawn. You drop another pawn, and then that's all she wrote. So even that little that extra effort at counterplay does not work. Now that was on king f5. Now if he tries king e5, same deal, king d3, and it's just basically too much material. There's a sacrifice, and just notice the constant theme, and basically there it is right there. Okay, and just notice the constant theme of that Zugzwang coming up. Here is probably Black's greatest chance at counterplay, but again, the queens get traded off in this line, and that's the whole idea. If of course, if the king goes to the a file, then the queen is gonna check on the a file, picking up the queen. And if he tries to, if he just tries to drop straight back, for instance, the queens will be traded off. He can't go here, so he's in a situation where the queens have to come off the board, and then we see the location of the king. All right, so there's another another spectacular end game for you. So again, please learn, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you on the next one.